African Year of Human Rights with a particular focus on women's rights. The theme is of significance as the continent continues to reflect on progress that has been made. And for more on the summit, we're now joined live from Kigali, Rwanda by SABC foreign editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Do tell us, what is the agenda for today at the summit?
Well, today we expect heads of state to attend the NEPAD meeting where they will take stock in terms of the implementation thereof. President Jacob Zuma is expected to attend that meeting, but earlier on there was a breakfast hosted by the Ghanaian President John Mahama where he was talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. You are aware that the Sustainable Development Goals, the new Sustainable Development Goals, were adopted in New York last year in September during the General Assembly. Now he's tasked with the responsibility to ensure that in the continent we do implement the Sustainable Development Goal. It was the first time in the history of the continent where the continent spoke in one voice in terms of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goal. Therefore, he called on member countries to ensure that they implement the decision taken and also to make a follow-up in terms of monitoring and evaluation. But he also touched on the very important issue recently. You are aware that Britain decided to exit the European Union, and him saying that most of the countries in the continent had good relations with European Union and Britain was part of that, particularly the former colonies like Nigeria, like Uganda, like Ghana, like South Africa. But now it means that they have to come up with a new strategy in terms of the trade relations with Britain, and therefore the rules of the game are likely to change. But also the Namibian president talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, focusing on poverty in particular, him saying that his country is doing a lot to ensure that they address the challenges of poverty, and saying that he has taken a decision as a head of state in Namibia to ensure that 40% of the budget is allocated to programs that are aimed at alleviating poverty. And Nigeria, of course, talking about the issue of security. The vice president who attended the breakfast this morning raising concerns around the issues of security. We saw what happened in France, currently in Turkey, but also in different parts of the continent, pockets of conflict, and him saying that his country is doing a lot to ensure that they address the challenge of Boko Haram, because for a continent to be sustainable and to develop, issue of peace and security is key.
Sophie, I mean, let's talk about the fact that UN Chief Ban Ki-moon is also on a farewell tour on the African soil. How has he been received by the African Union?
When he arrived yesterday, he will be attending the meeting where the issue of South Sudan will be discussed later today. IGAD, the regional body, and of course the AU high-level panel on South Sudan, headed by former President of Botswana, President Festus Mogae. Of course, President Jacob Zuma also will attend that meeting. You are aware that the African National Congress, the ruling party in South Africa, has got strong relations with the SPLM in South Sudan. Therefore, President Zuma will be part of that meeting. You are aware that our Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is also the Deputy President of the ruling party in South Africa, the African National Congress, is the special envoy for President Jacob Zuma on South Sudan. Therefore, we are expecting Ban Ki-moon to attend that meeting, and it's likely to be one of the most difficult tasks of Ban Ki-moon as he is on his farewell tour. You are aware that he will be leaving office in September to try and ensure that there's peace in South Sudan. He's only left with 2 months in office, and therefore this will be his big project to ensure that there's peace in South Sudan. Maybe we'll hear from him tomorrow. From there, he'll be flying down to South Africa, where he is expected to attend the International AIDS Conference in Durban. Therefore, it's a farewell tour, but a lot of work for Ban Ki-moon as he is about to leave office in September.
Maybe, Sophie, I mean, let's expand on that. I mean, just to take you back a moment there on the issue of South Sudan as well as Zimbabwe, the current conflicts there. Do you know if this is on the agenda of the AU today?
Yes, South Sudan is on the agenda, as I indicated earlier on, but Zimbabwe is not on the agenda. But I guess when leaders are talking about issues of human rights and people's rights, this issue will come up. But it is not officially on the agenda of the Peace and Security Council. The Peace and Security Council is going to discuss South Sudan.
All right. And Sophie, another important issue, of course, is the fact that the African Union Commission launched a campaign against child marriages 2 years ago. And of course, it's trying to make it a priority for the continent's heads of state. Do give us more details regarding this campaign. Any significant headway that has been made so far?
Yes, last week you'll recall that Sarah Kimani attended a conference where this issue was discussed, and the report was that indeed there's progress, but a lot needs to be done. There are countries which are really dealing with this issue of child marriage and also issues of abuse of women and children, but a lot needs to be done. We are going to speak to Pensi Tlakula, who's sitting in the commission that deals with human rights later today, and of course he will give us a feedback in terms of those issues, particularly issues of human rights, not only on issues of marriages, but in general, the human rights in the continent. There are concerns. Indeed, we are doing a lot of work to address the issues of human rights, but there's a lot that needs to be done. You are aware that there is instability in Burundi, you have instability in the DRC, you have problems in South Sudan, and when there are instability, you definitely touch on the issues of human rights because people are affected. We saw the visuals last week of young children running away from conflict, and these are children. They are supposed to be at schools, they are supposed to be at home, and therefore the onus is upon the leaders here to ensure that there's peace and stability in the continent. We cannot continue with this situation where some of the countries are experiencing instability and conflict, and their rights or the people's rights in those countries are affected. And all eyes are here to ensure that people monitor and listen to what leaders will say about issues of human rights, but also issue of peace and stability in the continent. Therefore, the Peace and Security Committee will have to ensure that they come up with a strong statement that deals with all these issues.
Now, Sophie, just on that matter as well, I mean, part of the theme there is, of course, with the focus on women's rights. I mean, what have you heard from the summit so far that is paying a special focus to the issues of women's rights?
Yesterday, the Editors Forum, the continental body or editors from the African continent, did discuss the issue of women's rights. And there is an agreement that a lot has been done. We have lots of countries that have put high on the agenda the women's rights. You see some countries taking a lead in terms of empowering women on positions of power, but also to engender the programs of government. But again, there you still have to have lots of improvement, because what is critical for women to make headways, it's only when they occupy those positions of power where you take decisions, where countries can be able to engender programs that are aimed at addressing issues of women.
Thank you so much to our foreign editor live to us from Kigali. That is Sophie Mokoena, and of course we will be touching base with her throughout the course of this bulletin.